Okay, so today we're going to talk about the Chapter 4 Cumulative Assessment. The word cumulative means like everything you've covered or everything you've talked about. So sometimes after tests or after we finish up chapters, we'll talk about the cumulative assessment, which basically asks questions about everything we've covered so far. So there will be questions from possibly Chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4 throughout this. I like to do these after tests just to make sure we remember and touch on things we've covered in the past. So making sure we're not forgetting them as we go. So the way this is going to work, I'm going to go slide by slide, and the best way for you to get the most out of this video will be to pause it, try the question on your own, see if you remember it, see if you don't remember it, see if you need a refresh on it, and then play the video again, and I'm going to go through it myself, and you can compare your answers, see if you got it right, remember what the steps were if you didn't remember, that type of stuff. So, Chapter 4 Cumulative Assessment, there will be about 6 or 7 questions, and we'll go through them one by one. So, the first question. It wants to know which equation matches the line shown in the graph. So they give you a graph, and they want you to choose A, B, C, or D for which equation goes with this graph. So again, I would pause it, look at this graph, see what you think, see if you think it's A, B, C, or D, and then we'll go through it. Okay, so first of all, first thing you should recognize is each of these equations is in what form? Slope-intercept form. So remember, slope-intercept form is, this is what we just covered in Chapter 4, y equals mx plus b. With two important parts to this. Your m, which is your slope, and your b, which is your y-intercept. So, those are the two spots that we have to fill in to make sure, to figure out which equation goes with this graph. So, first thing that I've talked about and reiterated multiple times is the easiest thing to pick out is your y-intercept. Remember, y-intercept, or your b, is where this line goes through or intercepts the y-axis. Okay, so if you look, this blue line goes straight through the y-axis at that point. And this point on the y-axis is -2. So that means the number that gets filled in for b is -2. So luckily on this one they give us a multiple choice. So if we look over here, we have to see which choices have -2 as our y-intercept. This one does. This one does not. So that one's eliminated. This one does. And this one does not. So that one's eliminated. So right off the bat, just by figuring out what our y-intercept is, we get it down to only 2 choices to choose from. Okay, so that's the first step. Then to find slope with a graph, remember you have to think rise over run. Okay, rise over run, rise over run. That's what you need to think. So this one, we already picked out a point where our y-intercept is, and then you just have to pick out another point that is on this line. Okay, so there's multiple, but here is one of them that is directly on that line. That line goes through this point right here. So, to find your slope, like we said, rise over run, I'm going to see how many it takes me, how many I have to go up or down, and then how many I have to go left or right to get from this point to that point. So if I'm at this point to start, my first movement should be up. Because remember, rise is your top in rise over run. So rise over run. So that means rise means I have to go up or down. So that's the only movement I'll do first. So obviously I have to go up, and I count how many spaces. 1, 2. So I went up 2. So that means in rise over run, my rise was 2. And then I have to go right, which is positive, 1 spot. So that means my run is 1. So 2 divided by 1 is just 2. So that means what I fill in for my m is the slope of 2. And if you look over here, you see that choice C does not have a slope of 2, but choice A does. So your answer for this question should be A. So that's how you break down this problem. First find your y-intercept, then find your slope to figure out which equation matches the line of this graph. Okay, so this one's kind of tough because it's a little bit different than some of the stuff we've covered. But I do want you to pause the video. The hint I will give you is this is like a deeper thinking problem. I want you to think about this equation and think about what these are, these ordered pairs, and what those mean, and see if you can figure this out. So, after you've played the video again, it says the equation 6x minus 5y equals 14 is written in standard form. Which point lies on the graph of this equation? So, here's something you might not know, but this is how you would break this problem down. For it to lie on the graph of this equation, it means it would have to make this equation true. In order for it to make an equation true, that means you have to have both sides match once you simplify. Okay, so stick with me and make sure you're paying attention to what I'm saying here. So our equation is 6x minus 5y equals 14. So what it means is, after I simplify the left side and simplify the right side, they should match for the point to lie on the graph. If they don't match, it doesn't lie on the graph. So here's the part where you need to be able to relate something. Ordered pairs, if you understand, have an x and a y. That's my x value is my first number, my y value is my second number. So what you'll have to do in this problem is plug the x in for x, the y in for y, and you're going to simplify. And when you simplify, you're looking to see if the left side will equal 14 like the right side does. If it matches, that's your answer. If it doesn't, that's not your answer. So this is a very straightforward problem on what you need to do. It's just a matter of thinking through the problem to get to that point. So, for example, I'll just go choice by choice. -4, -1. -4, -1 means in place of x, I'm going to plug in -4. In place of y, I'm going to plug in -1. So now I'm just going to simplify. 6 times -4 is -24. Remember, this minus sign goes with the 5, so -5 times -1 is +5. -24 plus 5 is -19. Then I check, does that match 14? It does not. So that tells me that F, or that first choice, -4, -1, is not my answer. So I just repeat that process with the other ones. So next one. We have G is -2 is my x, 4 is my y. 6 times -2 is -12. -5 times 4 is -20 equals 14. -12 minus 20 is -34. So once again, it does not match, so therefore that is not my answer. Alright, next we have H is, the x is -1, the y is -4. 6 times -1, -6. -5 times -4, +20. -6 plus 20 is 14. And finally we have one that does match the other side. So since after I plug those in and simplify, both sides match, H would be my answer. Okay, so that is your answer to this one. Again, we haven't had problems exactly like that, but I do want you to run into problems where you have to do a little bit deeper thinking to think that, okay, if we have an equation with x and y in it, and my ordered pair or my multiple choice answers are ordered pairs, you're going to plug those ordered pairs in for x and y and simplify to see if both sides match. So again, pause the video, see if you can figure out which line has a slope of 0. So once you start this video back up, right off the bat, you should be able to eliminate this down to just 2 choices. This is going upward, so we've talked about ones that have uphill lines are positive slopes, so it's not A. Ones that have downhill running slopes are negative slopes, so it's not C. So that leaves me with B and D. And this is like one we've discussed in class where B and D are just things you really need to memorize because you can have questions like this, and I have students get these confused a lot. We talked about the breakdown of rise over run and why the slopes for one of them is 0 and one of them is undefined. But your slope that has we can go ahead and break that down again. Remember, rise over run is what you're talking about with a graph. So, if I'm looking at rise over run for this, if I have 2 points right here, say I just pick any 2 points on this. First, I have to rise. So, if I go from this bottom one up to this top one, I rose 1 slot. But I'm already there. I don't have to run, go left or right any. So, my run would be 0. And then if you type in your calculator 1 divided by 0, you'll get error. So remember, you cannot divide by 0. So if you have a 0 on the bottom of your fraction, if your run is 0, that means it is an undefined slope. So that is your slope for a vertical line. So anytime you have a vertical line going straight up and down, your slope is undefined. So obviously that's not the answer. So you see that the answer is D, and the reason is, if I choose 2 points on here, and I break it down with rise over run, if I'm trying to go from this point to this point, I don't have to rise at all. I don't move up or down. So my rise is 0. And then my run will be 1. And 0 divided by 1 is, in fact, 0. So if your rise is 0, and your run is any number but 0, you'll have a slope of 0. So that means your answer on this one would be D. So again, you can just, instead of working that out, you can just memorize vertical lines, slope is undefined. Horizontal lines, slope is 0. Okay, so I'll give you a second to read this and try it out. It says, what is the slope of the line that passes through the points 2, -2, and 8, 1? So, this goes back to the slope formula I told you need to memorize and have to know. Hopefully you remember it. It is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So again, all you're doing, anytime they give you 2 points and ask you the slope, you're using this formula. Okay, and then you have to label your points because you have to tell in the ordered pair which numbers are going into which variable on the slope formula. So in an ordered pair, x comes first, so there's your x1, y1, x2, y2. So then from there, you're just going to plug in the proper numbers in for the proper variables. So my y2 is 1 minus my y1 is -2 over my x2 is 8 minus my x1 is 2. After that, we simplify top and bottom. 1 minus -2 is 3. 8 minus 2 is 6. And then if you have a fraction that can simplify, you want to simplify it. So 3 over 6 does reduce to 1/2. So your slope of a line that passes through the points 2, -2 and 8, 1 is 1/2. Okay, so that would be your answer for that one. So, this one says, a cell phone plan costs $10 per month plus 10 cents for each minute used. Last month, you spent $18.50 using this plan. This can be modeled by the equation below, where m represents the number of minutes used. And then they give us this equation, 0.1m plus 10 equals 18.5. So let me write that down. 0.1m plus 10 equals 18.5. Then it asks, how many minutes did you use last month? So here's my tip with word problems, because here's the thing that I've recognized over the years. They give you a big word problem with a bunch of information. Okay, they tell you about the cell phone, how much it costs per month, how much it costs per minute, how much you spent on it last month, all kinds of different things. But at the end of the day, they gave you this equation that represents this. So pretty much all of this information is right here. So you don't have to worry about all of that. They give you an equation with m, and they tell you m represents minutes. So m represents minutes. When they ask how many minutes did you use last month, all they want you to do is solve for m. You're solving this equation for m, meaning you're getting m by itself, which we did in chapter 1. So, because I've seen plenty of times where students have this big word problem, and immediately they shut down and say, oh, well, I don't know how to do this. There's too much information, too many words. But don't worry, because all there is this, and you're solving for m. That's the whole thing you're doing on this problem. So, let's talk about how we're going to do that. If we're solving this for m, remember, you solve for a variable by opposite operations, by getting m by itself. First thing you need to move is this plus 10. So to move a plus 10, you do the opposite to both sides, which is minus 10. When I say both sides, I mean both sides of the equal sign. So I do it on the left side over here, and the right side over here. The positive 10, negative 10 cancel. 0.1m equals 18.5 minus 10 is 8.5. Then last step, 0.1 times m. When they're right beside each other, that's multiplication. So you do the opposite, which is divide by 0.1. And I do get students confused here that they want to divide by 8.5. Remember, you're dividing by what you want, what's with the variable you want by itself. So in this, we want m to be by itself, so we have to divide by what's with it, which is 0.1. Because then the 0.1's cancel, you just have an m, which is what you want. 8.5 divided by 0.1 is 85. And if you look, 85 is B, so your answer to this would be choice B. There's also more than one way to do it. You can do that, which is fine, and you get the right answer. You can also, if it's a multiple choice answer, you can take each answer, kind of like we did on a couple questions ago, take each answer, plug it in for m, and then simplify to see if both sides match. If they do, that's your answer. So it's kind of like what we do to check our answers before. We take 85 and plug it in for m. 0.1 in place of m we put 85 plus 10 equals 18.5. 0.1 times 8.85 is 8.5. Bring down what I haven't used. 8.5 plus 10 is 18.5. And as you can see, that does match the other side. So that is your answer. Okay, all the other choices, A, C, and D, if you plug them in, it would not match the other side. So those would not be correct answers. So a couple different ways you can solve that. But the main thing I want you to get from that is, even with big word problems, don't let it intimidate you or throw you off. It's pretty straightforward. You have that equation, and you're solving for m. That's all. All right, next, we have this equation. This is also going back to chapter 1. It says, what value of x makes the equation true. So, if you look at this equation, 7 plus 2x equals 4x minus 5. To find out which equation, so also they might ask questions in different ways, because I know most of the time you're just used to solve for x, which is all we're doing here. But it wants to know what value of x makes the equation below true. All that means is you're going to solve for x. Okay, so you're solving this problem for x. You should recognize off the bat there's an x on the left side of the equal sign and an x on the right side of the equal sign. So if you think back to chapter 1, that was where we need to get those x's on the same side. So my first step will be to get the x's on the same side. It doesn't matter which side, they just have to go to the same side. Most of the time students like taking it to the left just because they like the x's on the left, which is fine. So that means I'm going to have to move this 4x. So if I'm moving an entire 4x that's positive, to move it I do the opposite, which is minus 4x on both sides. Positive 4x and negative 4x cancel each other out. I bring down my 7 because I haven't used it yet. 2x minus 4x is negative 2x. A couple things that will throw students off here. First of all, the minus sign is the negative. It's the same thing. Also, just because we're doing subtraction does not mean those cancel. Okay, remember, those x's stand for something. So like you could imagine this as two apples. You're taking away 4 apples. You'd have negative 2 apples left. So that x is still left there. Equals, what's left on the other side is negative 5. Okay, so now that we have our x's combined, we're just getting that single x by itself by opposite operations. So, to do that, first thing we need to move is positive 7. To do that, we do opposite operation of minus 7 on both sides. Cancel, cancel. Bring down the negative 2x equals negative 5 minus 7 is negative 12. Last step to get x by itself, negative 2 is being multiplied by x, so we do the opposite, which is divide by negative 2. So x equals, negative divided by negative is a positive, so negative 12 divided by negative 2 is 6. Again, if you're doing this on a test, you can plug that 6 back in where x's are and solve both sides to see if they match. If they match, that answer is right. If they don't match, that answer is incorrect. Okay, so this says solve the formula k equals 3m. So this is another one from chapter 1. So they really hit us hard with chapter 1 and chapter 4 on this. K equals 3m minus 7. And they want us to solve it for m. So we want to get, if you're solving for m, that means m is getting by itself. So, same thing, we're going to do all this by opposite operations. First thing you need to move is the minus 7 by adding it. Negative 7, positive 7, they cancel out. This is a variable, and they're adding a number. You cannot combine those. Those don't combine, so if they don't combine, you just bring it down as it is, which is k plus 7. That's exactly what you write, k plus 7. Equals, what's left, 3m. Alright, so last thing, to get m by itself, we have 3 times m, so we do the opposite, which is divide by 3. If I divide the right side, I have to divide the whole left side, everything over here. So the whole left side gets divided by 3. Those cancel. I can't divide that whole thing by 3, so I'm just going to leave it as it is. K plus 7 over 3 equals m. Now that m's by itself, we look and see if that matches anything over there. And as you can see, this is the same as B. So our answer would be choice B. And just make sure you understand, just because these are on opposite sides doesn't make it wrong. That m was on the left side, this m's on the right side, it's fine. The main thing you want to focus on is k plus 7 all over 3. We have k plus 7 all over 3. Okay, so, like I said, that's your Chapter 4 cumulative assessment. Hopefully you did well on that or understood some of that. Like I said, that's just trying to touch on things we've covered so far. Hopefully you did pretty well with that. And next video we'll start into the next chapter. Thanks.